Good morning and welcome to Emancipation, the Meaning of Freedom, a conference presented by the Humanities Division of Essex County College. The members of the conference committee are Professors Sean O'Connell, Jennifer Wager, Dr. Margaret Stevens, Dr. Eileen DeFries, and I am Rebecca Williams. I'm the conference chair. At this time, I would like you to join me in a hearty hello and welcome as I introduce Dr. Edith Abdullah, President of Essex County College.
Good morning, Essex County College family and friends. No man can give you your freedom. Freedom comes from within. It is a mental, physical, and spiritual transformation. History shows that on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Why did President Lincoln sign the Emancipation Proclamation? Was it to save the Union? Was it to free the slaves, truly free the slaves? Or was it some other reason for signing and the proclamation was actually signed in September, but it came into effect in January. Was there some other reason for that? Since that time, what has this really meant? What has the Emancipation Proclamation really meant to people of African descent, and for that matter, all disenfranchised people of color? Today, there are many Essex County experts, professors, administrators, students, friends, and historians that will tell you about the historical significance, of the Emancipation Proclamation. But I am here to tell you, as the president of a college that more than 70% of its students are of color, more than 49% are of African descent, I am here as that president to welcome you to an event that looks not only at the historical facts, the political implications, the social controversy, but also the most critical one. What are you doing to emancipate yourself? What are you doing to self-actualize who you are as an individual in the face of the many obstacles we have faced after the Emancipation Proclamation? And what are you doing to help your community actualize themselves? We here at Essex County College have more than 50 programs and hundreds of services to help you reach self-actualization, which is what the Emancipation Proclamation is really all about. We challenge you today to learn from its historical and social perspective, but we also challenge you to be the best that you can be and to emancipate yourself. Thank you to the faculty and the staff who have been so integral in making this celebration of the 150th anniversary of the signing so significant. And thank you for having an open mind, an open heart, and an open spirit to what you will learn today. Take care.
Today's conference is co-sponsored by the Africana Studies program coordinated by Professor Michael Naeem Nash. The Africana Studies concentration, which operates out of the Humanities Division, offers a variety of courses, among them Major Black American Writers, Survey of African American Literature, African and Caribbean Literature, the History of Black Cinema, the Art of the African American, Jazz Appreciation, African American history, African history, and much more. If you have an interest in the Africana Studies concentration at ECC, please sign up with the new Africana Studies Student Association. The conference's other co-sponsor is the Community College Humanities Association, a national organization which is housed right here at Essex County College and is run under the able leadership of Executive Director David Berry, who is also a history professor here. The CCHA annually publishes its own journal, the Community College Humanities Review, and holds a national as well as several divisional conferences each year. I'm extremely pleased to introduce you to Professor Berry.
Thank you so much, very kind introduction. Delighted to be here and welcome to all of you to this event. This is the Humanities at its best. Community College Humanities Association, housed here at Essex County College, has advanced and strengthened the humanities in this nation and community colleges since 1979. We've provided scholarship and research opportunities through our NEH grants, summer institutes, workshops, conferences, and as you've heard, publications. We're proud to be here at Essex County College. I've been here, as I tell my students, since the Franco-Prussian War, which is well, after the Emancipation Proclamation. This conference is a special event. I hope it's the beginning of an event we can conduct each year. I want to thank Rebecca Williams, Professor Williams, for crafting and shaping this conference in conjunction with her committee, many of whom you will meet. I want to thank the Dean, Dr. Steplight Johnson, with whom you will meet very soon. Dr. Gail Gibson, who unfortunately cannot be here, and of course our president, Dr. Edith Abdullah. Frederick Douglass, the great black liberator, said after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, he said, "This is a great national act." And he, in a speech, said, "By their relation to universal principles, it properly belongs to the whole human family. Henceforth that day shall take rank with the 4th of July. Henceforth it becomes the day of a new and glorious era in the history of American liberty." Today we explore this idea. We celebrate and we critique the Emancipation Proclamation. Enjoy.
Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just want to acknowledge Dr. Edwin Knox, our Vice President of Workforce Development here, and Patricia Slade, who is the Director of Student Life and Activities. Thank you. And now I'd like to just say a few words about our keynote speaker. Dr. Stephanie Aisha Steplight Johnson is an educator with over 20 years of experience at administering academic units and programs at colleges and universities. Her passion has been to work with units to help diverse students to achieve academic success in preparation for career and life success. She is the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Essex County College, which includes the Africana Studies Institute, Bilingual Studies, Biology and Chemistry, Humanities, the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, Math and Physics, and Social Sciences and the Urban Issues Institute. Previously, she was the South Carolina State University Executive Director of the Academic Success Academy, which served as the base for the newly created Center for Teaching and Learning for Faculty Professional Development, the General Education Curriculum Review efforts, and the planned Early College High School. Dr. Steplight Johnson formerly served as the Associate Director of the Office of Diversity and Pluralism in the College of Agricultural and Natural Resources at Michigan State University, where she implemented programs to interest, recruit, fund, and retain diverse graduate students. There, among other efforts, she worked with faculty in the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, the Graduate School, the Office for Inclusion and Intercultural Initiatives, HBCUs, diverse professional organizations that serve the Chicano and Native American groups, as well as African American and other groups. She was a member of the CANR Office of Academic and Student Affairs Faculty Learning Community, on evaluating excellence in teaching and co-authored the article Evaluating Teaching Excellence Across Diverse Disciplinary Units Within Agriculture Higher Education, published in the NACTA Journal. And she also co-presented a poster session at the MSU Faculty and Organizational Development Conference. Previously, she served as the special assistant to the provost and director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at St. Augustine's College in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she administered various college-wide faculty development initiatives funded by Title III, the Bush-Hewlett Foundation, and the Mellon Foundation. While there, she also taught African American Studies and the Freshman Seminar. At St. Augustine's College, she was also a member of the Curriculum Council, Honors Council, and Institutional Review Board, and was appointed as the college's representative on the board of directors for the local nonprofit organization Strengthening the Black Family. While at St. Aug, she was also co-director of the college's National Youth Sports Program Summer Camp. Dr. Steplight Johnson was project administrator for the NSF-funded SMART program at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. SMART worked with, that's the Science and Math Access to Resources and Technology, worked with pre-college elementary and middle school students who had special needs, and relative to her job, she served on the executive board of the Newark Special Education Parent Advisory Council, led by parent advocate Angela McBride. Prior to that, her other role at NJIT was assistant director of the Educational Talent Search Program, which is a federal TRIO program. Dr. Steplight Johnson earned a doctorate of philosophy in African American Studies from Temple University, a Master of Arts in Counseling, Human Services and Guidance from Montclair State University, and a Bachelor's of Applied Science in Engineering and Social Science from the University of Pennsylvania. She received a Fulbright dissertation fellowship for research conducted in Ghana. Her other travels to Africa include studying in Ghana as a graduate student in the summer of 1993 as part of the Temple University African American Studies Study Abroad program. South Africa in May 2007 as a chaperone for students at St. Augustine's College in Raleigh, and Kenya as a high school student in the American Field Service Student Exchange Program. Without further ado, I'm truly honored to present to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Stephanie Aisha Steplight Johnson.
I am Dr. Stephanie Aisha Steplight Johnson, and I am the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And on behalf of our Office of Academic Affairs and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Gail Gibson, I welcome you. Thank you to the conference committee for considering me as your keynote address presenter, and a special thank you to Professor Rebecca Williams, who handed me a bag of cookies that she made and then immediately asked me to be the speaker. So I could not say no. She blinded me by those cookies. Okay. We are here to examine the Emancipation Proclamation and commemorate the sesquicentennial or 150th anniversary of its signing. Okay. President Abraham Lincoln, who had been elected president in 1860, proposed the Emancipation Proclamation September 22nd, 1862, and he signed it on January 1st, 1863. It declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are, and henceforth, shall be free. The original document is housed in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The Emancipation Proclamation only covered states in the Confederacy that had not yet been taken over by the Union Army, and the Confederacy consisted of 11 core states: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, and Virginia. Now, who can tell me where this is, where Lincoln is? Very good. He is right across the street. Now, here at this conference, we are examining this executive order through the lens of humanities. So a fundamental question is, what is the meaning of humanities? According to the National Endowment for the Humanities, which was created in 1965 as a federal agency, humanities is defined as the study and interpretation of disciplines such as language, literature, history, philosophy, archaeology, comparative religion, and criticism and theory of the arts, and reflection on the past and current conditions of humans. Often the humanities addresses dilemmas faced by people and their efforts to resolve those dilemmas. Another lens that can be used is the Afrocentric paradigm, and that was developed by Dr. Molefi Asante. And here's a picture of me with my parents and Dr. Molefi Asante at the DIOP conference in Philadelphia, and that was in October 2010. So for about 21 years, at least 21 years, I think they're up to 22 now, Dr. Asante and his graduate students and alums have sponsored an annual conference where they examine the Afrocentric paradigm. And the core of the Afrocentric paradigm is that you place Black people at the center of the analysis as subjects and not objects. So for example, in this case, I will look at the Emancipation Proclamation and the meaning of freedom through the perspective of Black people such as Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and the soldiers. When speaking about the Emancipation Proclamation, Black people are often referred to as slaves, but in the Afrocentric paradigm, Black people are not seen as slaves, but rather human beings who came from civilizations in Africa and were enslaved for someone else's benefit. So they were still people. And that is how you look at them as subjects. Because if you look at them as slaves, then they become objects who had nothing other than to contribute as slaves on a plantation. Furthermore, the people did not instantly shed their African civilization the moment they landed in North America, or Central America, or South America. For example, take the work of filmmaker Julie Dash. Julie Dash released the film Daughters of the Dust 22 years ago in 1991, and she published a novel of the same title in 1997. And here's a photograph of a group of us at the Avery Research Center in Charleston, South Carolina, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the release of her film. And Julie Dash is standing in front of the bottle tree. She's the tallest person with the curly hair. She describes her film as a work of collective memory about the life of African people who were brought in ships across the Atlantic Ocean, which is referred to as the Middle Passage, then put on the auction block in Charleston, South Carolina, to be sold and purchased, and then put to work one place, the Sea Islands of South Carolina. What is unique about the people who were placed on the Sea Islands is that because of their remote, isolated area, they have retained some of the language, literature, oral tradition, history, philosophy, archaeology, religion, and arts of Africa, which, when blended with the Native American cultures that were on the Sea Islands and the Southern culture of South Carolina, created the Gullah Geechee culture, which still exists in South Carolina today. And my family, the Steplights, come from Charleston. I wish to highlight the meaning of freedom from the perspective of people such as Booker Taliaferro Washington, better known as Booker T. Washington. He writes that he was born in approximately 1858 or 1859 on a plantation in Virginia. He, like many enslaved people, was not sure of his exact birth date. And it seems, according to research, that he was actually born April 5th, 1856. In his autobiography, Up From Slavery, Booker T. Washington writes, "In this cabin, I lived with my mother and a brother and sister, till after the Civil War, when we were all declared free. Later, he states, I cannot remember having slept in a bed until after our family was declared free by the Emancipation Proclamation. So notice that for him, in terms of looking at the meaning of freedom, it was something that was declared by the Emancipation Proclamation. He was just about 5 years old at the time, and one of the scenarios stored in his memory was, so far as I can now recall, the first knowledge that I got of the fact that we were slaves and that freedom of the slaves was being discussed was early one morning before day, when I was awakened by my mother kneeling over her children and fervently praying that Lincoln and his armies might be successful and that one day she and her children might be free. So this scenario instilled in him that freedom was something you prayed for. Booker T goes on to discuss abolitionists who agitated for freedom. So we see that freedom is something you agitate for. And he talks about how every person on the plantation knew that the freedom of the slaves would be the one great result of the war. If the Northern armies conquered, every success of the Federal armies and every defeat of the Confederate forces was watched with the keenest and most intense interest. And he talks about how he was amazed that the people on the plantation knew so much. And he talks about that he was told that was called the grapevine telegraph. And he talks about enslaved people on the plantation who knew so much because they would go to the post office to pick the mail up and they would hear people having conversations. So when they came back to the plantation, they knew more about what was going on than the people in the big house. Looking through his own child eyes, when Booker T saw two girls eating ginger cakes, he defined freedom in his own way. And he said, I then and there resolved that if I ever got free, the height of my ambition would be reached if I could get to the point where I could secure and eat ginger cakes and the way I saw those ladies doing. So for him as a child, freedom meant being able to get and enjoy the food of his choice. Because as an enslaved child, he did not get to obtain and eat the food of his choice. So something so simple. Once the Civil War ended, Day of Freedom came, writes Booker T. It was a momentous and eventful day to all on our plantation. We had been expecting it. Freedom was in the air and had been for months. Music is a discipline within the humanities, and spirituals and code songs were a part of the culture during this period in time. According to Washington, now there was more singing on the plantation. And while most of the verses of the plantation songs made reference to freedom, the enslaved people were careful to explain it as freedom in the next world. So if there was, the master was around or the mistress was around, they would say, we're just singing about freedom in the next world. They would make sure the verses refer to the next world. So they would not alarm anyone to know that they were thinking about freedom in this life. Now, Booker writes, they gradually threw off the mask and were not afraid to let it be known that the freedom in their songs meant freedom of the body in this world. So because of the Civil War and because of the Emancipation Proclamation, they now felt that they could be honest and open and bold and admit that when they sang their songs about freedom, they were talking about freedom from enslavement on the plantation. They were not talking about freedom in heaven. He says a U.S. officer came to the plantation and read the Emancipation Proclamation from a long paper. And after the reading, we were told that we are all free and could go when and that now that they were free, they had to be responsible for meeting their own needs. So where do they go? What do they do? How do they establish a life as they walk off the plantation? Booker T. Washington went on to attend Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute, which is now known as Hampton University, and he found Tuskegee Institute in 1881. Another famous man from this period is Frederick Douglass. He was born in Maryland in 1818, and he published his autobiography in 1845 titled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, written by himself. Douglass, like Washington, was born during the era of enslavement, and like Washington, he too was unsure of his birth date. In fact, Douglass stated that most enslaved people refer to their birth date as planting time, harvest time, I was born during cherry time, my birthday is around springtime, or fall time. Douglass shares little detail about his escape from enslavement in Baltimore to freedom in New York, and he warns that people working on the Underground Railroad to assist people going north on their way to freedom should not do anything to hinder people still in the South from escaping from slavery. He does share that the wretchedness of slavery and the blessedness of freedom were perpetually before me. It was life and death with me. I remained firm, and according to my resolution, on the 3rd day of September 1838, I left my chains and succeeded in reaching New York without the slightest interruption of any kind. I have been frequently asked how I felt when I found myself in a free state. It was a moment of the highest excitement I ever experienced. Douglass went on to become an abolitionist, a critic of President Lincoln, the Secretary of the Santo Domingo Commission, Recorder of Deeds for Washington, D.C., and U.S. Minister to Haiti. And speaking of Haiti, one of the criticisms that he had of President Lincoln was President Lincoln's plan to send Black people to Haiti. He wanted to free them and send a group to Haiti. I just want to say a few words about Harriet Tubman. As we know, she was called Moses. She was the leader of the Underground Railroad. She was born in 1820, and she, again, there's a question mark, as I mentioned, with the uncertainty of the birth dates. She made 19 trips on the Underground Railroad and led 300 enslaved people to freedom. But what we don't often hear about her is before she became the leader or conductor of the Underground Railroad. And one of her heroes was Nat Turner. And Nat Turner was a man who was born in 1800. And in August of 1831, he led a rebellion, and 55 white people were killed. He was found in October, and he was hanged and then skinned in November. And while he was committing his rebellion, his rebellious acts, this is what Harriet Tubman thought about. All Harriet's daydreams were about him. One day he would certainly reappear, free, armed, and ready to continue the uprising. Harriet was determined she would join him. And though she was small, she thought she was as tough as a grown man. All kinds of rumors spread quickly throughout the slaves' quarters, as well as the big house. The slaves hoped, and the master dreaded, that Turner was collecting weapons and followers for a new attack. It was late fall when Harriet heard that Nat Turner had been captured. For 2 months, he had hidden in a cave in the wilds, but at last he had been tracked down. When she heard that Nat Turner refused to plead guilty And when she heard of his speedy execution, Harriet felt terrible sadness and disappointment, but also pride. Nat Turner had been defeated, but he had not been crushed. She knew now that the dream of freedom burned in every slave's heart, not just her own. Some slaves had been beaten down so badly they could hardly admit it, even to themselves. But now Harriet had seen that given a chance, freedom was still uppermost in their minds. Slavery was not something people became used to ever. So she was seen as a soldier, and she served as a scout for the Union forces. And another group that I would like to mention is the Massachusetts 54th Regiment. And here is a sculpture that exists in Boston as part of the Shaw Memorial, commemorating the bravery. And the soldiers believed that it was their duty and responsibility to fight for their freedom, and that it was their duty and responsibility as men. And they were not paid the same wages. They were paid less than white soldiers, and they were given drudgery work or fatigue work initially. And because of their principles, for about 18 months, they refused to accept their pay because they said that they deserved equal pay. And they made the choice based on principle that they would not accept their pay as long as it was unequal. And for 18 months, they did not. So these are soldiers, just an example of how blacks have fought in all of the wars for freedom, for America's freedom, even though while they were fighting and considered themselves equals, they were discriminated against. So in closing, as we go throughout the day and think about the concept of freedom over time, since the 1800s, since the time of the Civil War, we could think about how does our mindset determine how we perceive ourselves and our freedom. So is it something that you pray for? Is it something that you dream about? Does it mean that you have access to food? Does it mean that you're in a position to give up your pay? So today, in 2013, if we look at different people and the positions that they take, are they willing to jeopardize their position, their job, their employment, in order to stand up for what they believe is right? So I hope that I have left you with some background about the concept of freedom and something to continue to reflect on as we go throughout the day and listen to the other presentations that examine the concept of freedom over time from the past up until the present day. Thank you.
This is for Dean Steplight Johnson. We just want to thank her for being a part of this important celebration, and also on behalf of the committee and the Humanities Division, I would like to thank her formally with these beautiful flowers.
Can we get another round of applause for our dean? Thank you very much, AM. I encourage you to please come during your free periods to hear some of the presentations. We've got an exciting schedule for you today. Thank you so much.